When you are selling in one province and buying in another, if things are not done properly, I'm not joking when I say it can cost you thousands of dollars and so many headaches, because there are so many moving parts with a move like this. The sale of your current home, the purchase here in Ottawa, the closing dates, the deposit, and sometimes you don't even know where to start. So in this video, I'm going to give you actual tactical advice from someone who has not only made a few long distance moves myself, but I've also helped clients through this exact type of move. My name is Rebecca. I'm a real estate agent here in Ottawa, and I help families relocate to Ottawa using both personal and professional experiences. So if you are moving to Ottawa and you are in need of some guidance, send me a text, send me an email, whatever you prefer, and we can start getting some of those questions that I know you have answered. So before you book that house hunting trip, let's start with step number one. So the first thing that you need to do is to figure out, okay, how much can we afford in Ottawa? So you would start with talking to a mortgage professional to see what you would get pre-approved for in Ottawa, and if the amount actually aligns with what you're looking for in a property here in Ottawa. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and talk to a real estate agent to really figure out, okay, if we're relying on the sale of our house, for example, to put down as a down payment, you need to figure out how fast your house can sell and what can it sell for, because that number is so important because it affects your down payment, your closing costs, moving costs, and whether or not you may even need bridge financing or some other type of plan to connect the two transactions. You need to know what's even realistic before you start falling in love with areas or homes that may not align with the full picture. So super important to have a really good chat with a real estate agent to figure out how much it would sell for, what you would take away after fees, payout, legal fees, real estate fees, all of that, so that you have a concrete idea of what you would walk away with and what you have to work with here for your purchase here in Ottawa. Now, before you come down for a house hunting trip, I would really focus on the neighborhoods first. So if you can, take a day trip or a weekend trip to Ottawa before you're actually ready to buy, and don't make that trip necessarily just about the houses. You want to make it about the area. Drive around, go to the grocery stores, look at the plazas, see how things actually feel. Maybe there's a specific school that you're wanting your children to go to, and you're trying to narrow it down between a couple of different options. This is a really useful way to really narrow it down. And if you can't make it here, what I would suggest is, it's a little bit annoying to have to do, but use Google Maps. I know it's not perfect, but it still helps. Drive around on the street view, look at how far the house is from shopping, schools, whatever it is that matters to you most. Use it as a tool to help you figure out, okay, can I actually see myself living in this neighborhood? Does it fit what our family needs? Something to also pay attention to when you're trying to narrow it down is, if transit is extremely important to you and it's an absolute must, some areas are terrible when it comes to transit. So if you're moving from a city where you're used to better transit or you're going to need it, this is why it's super important to speak to a real estate agent to really help you navigate through all of that. The goal is to narrow it down before you get here, so when you do come for a house hunting trip, we're not wasting half the time in areas you probably would have crossed off anyways. If you're moving from another province, the numbers here may not be the same as what you're used to in a different province. You need to budget for closing costs on top of your down payments. A general estimate that we usually say is 1.5% to 2% of the actual purchase price. So let's say, for example, if you were buying a house at $700,000, that could be around $10,000 to $14,000 that you would need available for closing costs. The money is not your down payment. It's for things like land transfer tax, legal fees, title insurance adjustments, and some other, closing related costs. Now, this is especially important because if you're using the profit from your current home to buy here, you don't want to necessarily assume that every dollar is going straight to your down payment. Some of that money actually needs to be set aside for the actual cost of closing. And sometimes that can throw people off a little bit if they haven't bought in Ontario before. Now, this is where it's really important to have the right team. So what do I mean by that? In Ottawa, a typical closing time frame is often around 30 to 60 days. It really just depends on the market, the property, the seller, and the actual offer itself. If you're selling and buying at the same time, the timing needs to be handled so carefully. The last thing that you want is to sell your house too quickly, have a firm closing date, and then not have a concrete plan for where you're moving in Ottawa. This is why your selling agent and your Ottawa buying agent needs to be in touch, or at the very least, both need to understand the full timeline, because these two transactions, they are so connected. And if your current home closes before your Ottawa home is ready, where are you going? If your Ottawa purchase closes before your sale funds are even available, how are you covering the down payment? If there's a delay on either side, what is the backup plan? Those are not things that you want to figure out after the offer is accepted. You want to think through them before. Your real estate agent that you have in the province that you're currently living in might not be extremely familiar with how long the process takes or even how the process takes here in Ottawa. They can vary significantly from province to province. Now, when you purchase a property here in Ottawa, or when you put an offer rather, there's something called the deposit, which is due 24 hours after the offer is accepted. And that deposit's not the same thing as your down payment, but it does go towards your purchase, but it still needs to be available right away. So if you're thinking, well, I'll just use the money from the sale of my current house, that may not work for the deposit if your current home hasn't even closed yet. And even when the money is transferred between banks, there can be holds or even delays depending on how it's moved. So before you start offering on houses, you need to know where your deposit money is coming from and whether it's actually accessible. I know it's one of those boring details that feels small, but I promise you it's so important. And that's why I like to talk about it early with my clients, because when you're relocating, the goal is not just to buy a house and that's it. The goal is to get from one home to the next without creating unnecessary stress or problems in the middle.